black middle class wasn't a carbon copy of the white middle class.
So the first book is called Black Picket Fences. It's a study of a black middle class neighborhood in Chicago. And it was motivated because when I first got to University of Chicago for grad school, we were doing a bus tour. A professor was taking us on a bus tour of Chicago. We were driving through a neighborhood that was had nice bungalow homes with very manicured lawns and clean streets and so on. And the professor said, some of you all might think this is a white neighborhood, but this is actually a black neighborhood. And I thought, why would we necessarily think this is a white neighborhood? Just because it's clean and the houses are in good repair? And I was both offended and fired up by that particular comment. And I had already come to graduate school wanting to study non-poor black neighborhoods because much of the literature in sociology, especially in the 80s in response to the work of William Julius Wilson, who wrote a series of books, I don't know which is most famous, but The Decline and Significance of Race and The Truly Disadvantaged are ones that we often talk about. And they very much focused on poor black neighborhoods, which is very important, and I don't want to understate the importance of studying concentrated poverty and studying the particular devastating effects of deindustrialization and movement and jobs and so on. But it really, I thought, created a misimpression of African Americans and a misimpression of black neighborhoods. So much so that a professor at the University of Chicago would, assume that looking at a well-kept black neighborhood would confuse people to think they were white. So while aesthetically the neighborhood looked very much like any other middle-class neighborhood, I was also interested in the particular challenges that black middle-class neighborhoods face and the residents within them face. And the particular spatial, again, I'm very interested in the configuration of cities. What neighborhoods are next to each other? How have those, over time, grown, connected to each other? So black middle-class neighborhoods are often, they're much closer to black poor neighborhoods. So they have this spatial connection with poor black neighborhoods, and they are much closer to poor neighborhoods than our white middle-class neighborhoods. And they also have much higher poverty rates than do white middle-class neighborhoods. Basically, the point is, middle-class whites are able to spatially distance themselves from poverty, whereas middle-class blacks are not. And so I was interested in the particular challenges of that, and especially the challenges around raising young people. So what I pick up from that book is the critique that it has of black middle class, which of course the black Anglo-Saxons does as well. But it's a different kind of critique. I think it's more a critique of it's more of an intellectual critique than I think a critique of their practices. I think.
Yeah. I think that reading through your writing of it made me remember things that I had forgotten about the black bourgeoisie. But I think it's interesting the way that you kind of pick up from me and start to talk about this middleman kind of thing. And I think that this is a relevant contemporary conversation.
Basically, these are the gentrifiers that moved into North Kensington, Oakland, and while I use the concept to describe their particular position as brokers, resource brokers, between white elites, white banking elites, white developer elites, white bureaucratic elites, white political elites, and this poor black neighborhood. So I talk about their brokerage function. I think there are corollaries of this black middleman in a lot of social institutions. So I have a friend that positive gentrification as the answer to how to improve poor people's lives, I think is wrong-headed. Because the answer to the second question is not sufficiently policed, which is, if you look at a gentrifying neighborhood and you see, oh, this neighborhood is really improved, but it has a whole different population in it, that doesn't mean that we've improved poor people's lives, or we've improved a poor neighborhood. We've just made a poor neighborhood not poor anymore with a whole bunch of not poor people. So I think though the two questions are, if the question's going to be, how do we improve the lives of poor people, I don't think gentrification is the answer. I think investments in living wages, investments in public services and education, investments in drug treatment centers, investments in rehabilitation as opposed to incarceration. So I think investments in people's lives as opposed to transforming a neighborhood by just moving a whole new population is part of the question. And I have a critique of both the gentrification model and the mixed income model, which is the model to replace public housing, because I do see them as replacement policies, not investment policies.
Any books from your colleagues on those sundry topics you just laid out there that
supports to make, as Clinton said many years ago, to make work pay.